Hollywood has a dirty secret. The smarter a science fiction film tries to be, the harder the industry works to bury it. What you are about to see is not a list of bad science fiction. It is the opposite. Every entry on this list costs real money, real careers, real years of obsession from filmmakers who believed audiences could handle ideas instead of explosions. But they were all wrong. Or maybe the studios were. Because each of these films was punished on release, dismissed by critics, dumped by distributors, or sabotaged by the very people who funded them. In fact, one director was forced to fire 300 crew members in person during production. Another lost $43 million because a Paramount executive called it too intellectual. These films weren't failures, they were warnings. Warnings about what happens when art gets ahead of its audience. Number 10. Sunshine, 2007. Danny Boyle and Alex Garland came off the runaway success of 28 Days Later, a tiny zombie film built on an $8 million budget that exploded into $85 million worldwide. Fox handed them 5 times that budget for Sunshine. They got $40 million to send 8 astronauts toward a dying sun with a stellar bomb the size of Manhattan. Boyle wanted realism above everything. So, he brought in physicist Brian Cox as scientific consultant, then forced his entire cast into a real decommissioned nuclear submarine to simulate the psychological pressure of living inside a metal coffin in space. The budget was $40 million. For a film of that ambition, that is almost nothing. Before production, Cillian Murphy spent weeks studying solar physics. They weren't making a blockbuster. They were making something closer to a philosophical document disguised as a space thriller. Behind the scenes, the crew built a full-scale ship interior at 3 Mills Studios in London. And here's the thing. Sunshine was supposed to be the first chapter of a planetary trilogy. A slow descent into humanity's relationship with the stars. What audiences did not know is that Garland had already outlined 2 more films. Boyle spent a full year just writing the script with Garland across 35 separate drafts, another year preparing, 3 months filming, and a final year completing visual effects. Boyle insisted that only one visual effects house handle all the effects work, so the visual language stayed consistent and controlled. That decision pushed the release from late 2006 to July 2007. Then Fox released it into a market that wanted comic book heroes and sequels. And what followed was a total financial disaster. $40 million. Gone, just like that. Sunshine grossed roughly $35 million worldwide. It died quietly. Boyle has since admitted the box office failure killed those plans permanently. He vowed never to make another film set in space and called the production spiritually exhausting. Number 9. Mr. Nobody, 2009. A Belgian director spent 7 years writing a script about the multiverse. He pitched the idea to Jared Leto, who later agreed to play the same character at ages 9, 15, 34, and 118. The physical transformation demanded significant prosthetics, costume work, and preparation time on each occasion. The prosthetics and design was so intense that Jared Leto had to sit in a makeup chair for at least 6 hours every single shooting day. The budget ballooned to roughly $47 million. And here's the thing. Jaco van Dormel built Mr. Nobody as a science fiction puzzle box wrapped around string theory, the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics, and the butterfly effect. Leto plays Nemo Nobody, the last mortal human on Earth in the year 2092, reflecting on every possible life he could have lived based on a single childhood decision. The film features 3 different wives across 3 different timelines, played by Sarah Polley, Diane Kruger, and Lynn Dan Pham. The aging makeup applied to Leto remains some of the most convincing prosthetic work of the decade.
Nemo!
With effects teams transforming the actor into a frail centenarian using techniques that took hours of daily application. Production stretched across Belgium, France, Germany, and Canada. Composer Pierre van Dormel, the director's own brother, scored the film and died of cancer during production. His score became the emotional backbone of every alternate timeline. When Mr. Nobody premiered at the Venice International Film Festival in 2009, it grossed $3.5 million worldwide. Against a $47 million budget, that ratio, $13 spent for every $1 returned, stands as one of the most brutal mismatches in recent science fiction history. Number 8. Coherence, 2013. The entire Coherence film was shot in 5 days inside the director's own house using a budget of $50,000. There was no script, there was no crew. There were only 8 actors, 12 pages of notes, and a comet passing overhead in the story. James Ward Burkett had spent the previous decade working on Pirates of the Caribbean films alongside Gore Verbinski. He left that world behind to test a single question. Could a filmmaker create genuine science fiction with no money, no crew, and almost no plan? Coherence answered that question beyond doubt. Behind the scenes, Burkett gave each actor a sealed envelope every night containing instructions only their character would receive. The cast had no idea what the other characters knew. Every reaction on screen is genuine confusion captured in real time. Nicholas Brendon, famous to a generation as Xander from Buffy the Vampire Slayer, plays a thinly fictionalized version of himself, mocking his own fated career as a former television actor. The film took roughly 1 year of Burkett drawing charts and diagrams to track every possible reality the script needed to handle, mapping the chaos of multiple dimensions colliding inside one suburban home. Production cost stayed microscopic. The crew was extremely tiny, if any at all. The lighting was natural or improvised with glow sticks the characters carry through the entire film. And here's the thing, there are other versions of this film. The comet has created quantum decoherence, the actual physics concept where a system loses its definite state and splits into multiple simultaneous outcomes. And the film deploys this idea with genuine accuracy. Burkett had spent years researching quantum mechanics before writing the outline. The science is not decoration. It is the plot. When Coherence premiered at Fantastic Fest in September 2013, it earned approximately $140,000 at the box office. A sequel was announced over a decade later, in 2024, because the original never stopped finding new audiences. Number 7. Primer, 2004. A software engineer with no film school training built one of the most influential time travel films in history for $7,000. That is not a typo. The entire production budget of Primer would not cover a single day of catering on most Hollywood movies. Shane Carruth wrote the script, directed it, produced it, edited it, composed the score, and starred in the lead role. He shot the film on the outskirts of Dallas, Texas, across 5 weeks, using a skeleton crew of 5 people. Most of the supporting cast were friends and family who had never acted professionally. The shooting ratio was a punishing 2-to-1, meaning Carruth could only afford to film each scene twice on Super 16mm stock. There were no second chances, no retakes for safety. Every frame had to count because the budget literally could not stretch any further. Primer follows 2 engineers who accidentally discover time travel and immediately try to use it to game the stock market. The dialogue is dense, technical, and completely uncompromising. But here's where it gets interesting. Carruth had a degree in mathematics and previously worked as an engineer himself in real life. So, he refused to simplify the technical dialogue for the audience. Characters speak over each other in dense scientific jargon. Some fans who had watched the film said they needed to re-watch it 10, 15, 20 times trying to decode its structure. It became the unofficial benchmark for cerebral indie sci-fi. The plot deliberately obscures itself because Carruth wanted viewers to feel the same disorientation as the characters trapped in their own timeline. There are no explanations, no helpful exposition. The film trusts you completely, and if you cannot keep up, it does not wait. Primer grossed approximately $545,000 during its limited theatrical run. It never expanded past 31 screens at any point. Number 6. Solaris, 2002. George Clooney was the biggest movie star on Earth in 2002. Ocean's 11 had just made over $450 million worldwide. He could greenlight almost anything he ever wanted at the time. Instead, he chose to star in a slow, meditative space drama about grief, memory, and the impossibility of bringing back the dead. Steven Soderbergh, fresh off his Best Director Oscar for Traffic, wrote and directed it. James Cameron produced it through his Lightstorm Entertainment Company. The budget came in around $47 million. 20th Century Fox financed and distributed. On paper, this was the most prestigious science fiction project of the year. Then the marketing department got their hands on it, and the result was a roller coaster of disasters. Here's where it all begins. When Solaris came out, Fox had no idea how to market it. In what became one of the more embarrassing studio decisions of the era, executives leaked a story to the press that the film had initially received an R rating because of a scene showing Clooney's bare backside. The appeal was overturned 12 days before release, and the rating dropped to PG-13. The studio thought the controversy would drive curiosity. It drove nothing. The film grossed approximately $30 million worldwide against its $47 million production budget. In fact, Roger Ebert gave it 3.5 stars and called it exactly the kind of smart film that has people arguing on their way out of the theater. Number 5. The Fountain, 2006. Darren Aronofsky flew to Australia and personally fired 300 crew members. He looked each of them in the eye and told them their jobs no longer existed. That moment marked the collapse of one of the most ambitious science fiction productions in Hollywood history, and it happened before a single frame of the final film was ever shot. The original version of The Fountain had a budget of $70 million, with Brad Pitt and Cate Blanchett attached as leads. Warner Brothers and Village Roadshow co-financed. Sets had already been constructed in Australia, including a 10-story Mayan pyramid built to scale for the conquistador sequences. Aronofsky had spent years researching Mayan mythology, brain surgery, neuroscience, and the heat death of the universe. Then Brad Pitt demanded script changes weeks before production. Aronofsky refused to compromise. Village Roadshow pulled financing, and just like that, The Fountain collapsed. It was so terrible that it cost Warner Brothers approximately $18 million in sunk costs, with elaborate sets auctioned off across Australia, and Blanchett paid in full despite never filming a single scene. But here's the thing, Aronofsky did not give up. He spent 2 years rebuilding the project from scratch at half the budget. Hugh Jackman replaced Pitt. Rachel Weisz took the female lead. The new budget was $35 million, and Aronofsky used genuinely revolutionary techniques to compensate. Instead of computer-generated nebulae for the space sequences, he photographed microscopic chemical reactions in water and enlarged them hundreds of thousands of times. Yeast, solvents, and dye created the cosmic backdrop. The Fountain premiered at the Venice Film Festival in 2006 and was actively booed by audiences. The film opened to $3.7 million in its first weekend in the United States, eventually grossing only $16.5 million worldwide against its $35 million budget. Number 4. Dark City, 1998. Alex Proyas spent 8 years developing Dark City. He wrote the original story in 1990 and partnered with screenwriters Lem Dobbs and David S. Goyer to refine it. New Line Cinema financed the project at a budget of approximately $27 million, with production based at Fox Studios Australia to control costs. The mini-major studio also pre-sold most overseas rights to mitigate risk. Every costume, every set, every piece of that world was built from scratch on a soundstage. Behind the scenes, production designer Patrick Tatopoulos built 50 separate sets to create the shape-shifting city. The cast included Rufus Sewell, Kiefer Sutherland, Jennifer Connelly, William Hurt, and Richard O'Brien. Connelly, playing a jazz singer in the film, recorded her own vocals for the director's cut, a fact that was hidden from audiences for a decade because New Line dubbed her voice with another singer in the theatrical release without explanation. Then, test screenings happened, and New Line panicked. Executives believed audiences would not understand the film. They forced Proyas to add an opening voiceover narrated by Sutherland that explained the entire mystery of the plot within the first 90 seconds. The studio essentially spoiled their own movie before the title card appeared. Dark City grossed approximately $27 million worldwide. Number 3. Annihilation, 2018. Here's a true story that sounds unbelievable. A Paramount executive screened a finished science fiction film, watched the final 20 minutes, and declared it too intellectual for audiences. That single decision led to one of the most insulting distribution deals in modern Hollywood history. Alex Garland had just earned an Oscar nomination for Ex Machina. His follow-up was Annihilation, an adaptation of Jeff Vandermeer's Southern Reach trilogy starring Natalie Portman, Tessa Thompson, Jennifer Jason Leigh, Gina Rodriguez, and Oscar Isaac. The budget came in around $55 million, financed by Paramount and Skydance. Behind the scenes, production designers built a haunting alien biosphere called the Shimmer, using a combination of practical effects, miniatures, and elaborate practical creature work. The lighthouse climax sequence alone took weeks to film. Then the regime at Paramount changed. New executives saw a poor test screening and panicked. Producer David Ellison of Skydance demanded that Garland rewrite the third act to make Portman's character more sympathetic and the ending more conventional. Producer Scott Rudin refused, defending Garland's vision because Rudin held final cut authority. Paramount lost the internal battle. Instead of fighting back, they retaliated. The studios sold the international distribution rights to Netflix in a humiliating deal made just weeks before theatrical release. Annihilation opened in only the United States, Canada, and China. The film grossed approximately $43 million worldwide. Number 2. Children of Men, 2006. Alfonso Cuarón spent 2 years in pre-production on a film that Universal Pictures then released with almost no marketing strategy, no awards campaign, and a Christmas Day dump date that suggested the studio had already given up before the opening weekend numbers came in. The film was Children of Men, and it was built on one of the most terrifying premises in modern science fiction. The total production budget reached $76 million. During production, Cuarón and cinematographer Emmanuel Lubezki engineered some of the most technically demanding sequences in cinema history. The car ambush scene runs 4 minutes and 7 seconds in a single, unbroken take. The Bexhill refugee camp battle sequence stretches 6 minutes and 30 seconds without a visible cut. Clive Owen was physically present in active pyrotechnic environments for days of shooting, with the camera operators moving through collapsing architecture and smoke alongside him in real time. One famous shot involved blood accidentally splattering across the camera lens during the car attack. Cuarón yelled to stop filming, but an explosion drowned out his voice, so the camera kept rolling. That accident became one of the most iconic moments in the film.
Stop! Stop the fucking car! Give me the fucking key! Give me the fucking key!
On set, Kane modeled his aging hippie character Jasper on John Lennon. Banksy was approached to collaborate but declined, though one of his pieces appears in the film. Children of Men approximately $35 million domestically and another $34 million internationally. Total worldwide receipts of around $70 million. Number 1. The Thing, 1982. In June 1982, John Carpenter released a film that critics called a barf bag movie, instant junk, and pornography of violence. Roger Ebert dismissed it. Vincent Canby of the New York Times savaged it, and here's how everything started. After the success of Halloween and Escape from New York, Universal Pictures handed Carpenter a $15 million budget and complete creative control to produce The Thing. He used the money to build something unprecedented, something beyond what Universal even expected. Behind the scenes, special effects artist Rob Bottin worked on the practical creature effects for over a year. Bottin's work required the construction of dozens of custom animatronic rigs, prosthetic systems, and practical mechanical puppets. Each built to execute a specific transformation sequence on camera with no digital assistance because digital visual effects did not yet exist at that level. The production designs and after effects were so rigorous that Bottin eventually got hospitalized with exhaustion, double pneumonia, and a bleeding ulcer. Then, Carpenter brought in Stan Winston to assist when Bottin collapsed. The creature designs cost roughly $1.5 million alone. The film was shot in Stewart, British Columbia, and on refrigerated sound stages in Los Angeles, with temperatures dropped to 40 degrees Fahrenheit so the actor's breath would visibly fog. On set, Carpenter himself contributed additional musical elements, though Morricone received the sole screen credit. The cast was led by Kurt Russell, whose costuming and appearance were deliberately designed to echo Clint Eastwood's Western archetypes, a visual choice Carpenter made consciously to frame the story as a kind of existential frontier Western set on ice. Every detail of the production was considered, researched, and executed with precision. Despite all these, when The Thing premiered, it made just $19.6 million against its $15 million budget. Universal essentially blacklisted Carpenter from major studio work in the aftermath. In fact, he was fired from directing the 1984 adaptation of Stephen King's Firestarter as a direct consequence of The Thing's box office performance. Every film on this list shares one painful truth. The artists who made them believed audiences were capable of more than spectacle. They were punished for that belief. Some directors lost their careers, others lost years of their lives. Now to you, let me know in the comments which of these films deserves the loudest second chance, and which one you think Hollywood owes the biggest apology to. If this list opened your eyes to a film you had never heard of, hit the like button and subscribe for more deep dives.